we've been talking about self-care in the winter because we're under pretty extreme lockdown conditions here, as I imagine some of you may be. And so part of that self-care regime would be getting into the woods around here. So you may know that Karmê Chöling owns 750 acres of forest or land altogether. Most of it is forested. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how we could enter the forest and be in the forest when we might assume initially there's not much going on. There's no underbrush growing, the moss is all covered with snow. But I wanted to just bring your attention to what I do when I go out into the woods. So if you look beyond me here, you see kind of a vast jumble of small trees and not many bushes, mostly thin to medium-sized trees. And what I like to do when I come into the forest is just allow my gaze to kind of open up and relax. So, you know, in meditation we talk about having a soft gaze. So I like to do that when I'm in the forest also. So when I come out to an area like this, I just spend a couple of minutes letting my eyes rest on the landscape. And what's interesting about the winter landscape is that it's pretty monochromatic. We have the white snow and we have the dark tree trunks against it. And I have this idea that our mind relaxes when visually there's not a lot going on. Now, laying on your back and looking at the sky is a wonderful thing to do in the summer. But in the winter, there's less motivation to do that. So let's just imagine we've come out to the woods, we're all suited up, we have our warm clothes on, and we just allow our gaze to travel across the forest, taking in the very relaxing, I would say, monochromatic landscape. White, here mostly gray. So those two extremes. We see a very bright patch over there where we see a white paper birch, but pretty much everybody else has fallen in line with this gray idea. So I'll just take some time to rest here and allow my gaze just to open up. And at the same time that I'm experiencing that panoramic vision, I can notice beech leaves that haven't fallen off. They keep their leaves throughout the winter. And then as I really relax with this landscape, I can begin to pick out features that are of interest to me. I see in front of me a blue trail marker. I see really interesting textures on most of the tree trunks. They seem quite individual. So let's just look around. We can scan from the birch to our right over there, which has some a beige color going up it, and then sweep across these smaller poles. Trees coming over to here we have a blue marker. And then what's really interesting to me is this apartment building in the background where you see that all of the bark has come off the tree and we can see how many birds and insects have burrowed in there for food and shelter. So we spent some time just relaxing with the landscape, and now we're allowing ourselves to kind of hone in on some features. And as we do that, we see that the forest, in spite of its bland or dead appearance, is actually full of a lot of organisms. So here we see on this one birch trunk, like maybe hundreds of these little baby shelf funguses. So that's kind of cool. And we could take our gloves off and feel them. There's some little pieces I want to poke at here and think, look at that. Yeah. There's also some lichen up mixed in there. And then as I look around to these other trees, this is my favorite so far. I think this is really, really nice, this texture here. And then let's look at this next birch next to it. which is covered with mosses and more lichen. Seems to be a pattern there. And then behind us, I'm just going to move backwards. And wow, look at this. I think without seeing the leaves that this tree in front of us might be some sort of cherry or in that family just because of the bark, but I don't really care what they are, you know. Some of us get very hung up in identification when we're in the forest, and what we're more interested in is tone, texture, our feeling when we're being here, feeling like we're great explorers in a very, very small, I don't know why I said small, in a very open space. It's a kind of a space without dimensions. We could look straight up at the overstory. We could look down. We could begin to make a relationship with the tree trunks, looking at the scars on them, looking at what's growing on them, thinking about how interesting this texture is. This looks like, we'll call this the alligator of Karmê Chöling. Has a really amazing bark structure. So there's really a lot going on. We could begin to look at the growing tips of the branches, seeing that this is going to become a leaf grouping in the spring. There are charts that we could look at if we're interested to identify them, but I'm kind of post-identification right now in my life. It's like, how can I experience this landscape fully and really appreciate what's going on here? How cold the air is, listening to the bird in the background, a nuthatch making its plaintive song, the river, the highway going by, and really being grateful for this land that we have.